I had just poured my first real cup of coffee in the new kitchen, the scent of it still mixing with the salt in the air. The morning light spilled across the tile like a soft welcome. The beach house had been quiet, clean, untouched, mine. For the first time in decades, I had a space that wasn't borrowed, shared, or made to feel like someone else's convenience. The landline rang. That old beige phone I brought from my previous place, more out of habit than need. I picked it up, expecting maybe a neighbor or the post office about the mailbox number. Instead, it was Taryn. My daughter-in-law. She didn't say hello. "We'll be there at 9 a.m., she said. "There are 15 of us. Hope you've got towels. The kids want to swim." I didn't speak. I think I forgot how. There was no question in her voice, no space for response. Only declaration. As if the house I bought with the last third of my life was just another beach rental in her summer rotation. I blinked and looked out the window. The tide was coming in slow and steady, brushing the shore like it didn't know how to do anything else. I felt something catch in my chest, not panic, but something colder. I set the mug down. 15 people. We'll bring snacks, she added, her tone almost cheerful. And Travis is bringing his dog. I figured it's fine since there's a deck. Before I could form a word, she hung up. The dial tone buzzed against my ear. At 8:53 a.m., I heard tires on gravel, then doors slamming, then voices, laughter, flip-flops slapping on pavement, coolers dragged across the porch, folding chairs scraping against wood. I didn't move. I just stood in the kitchen listening as my peace got swallowed whole. From the front window, I saw Taryn step out of the lead car in sunglasses and a sundress clipboard in hand, like she was running a summer camp. And that's when I knew this wasn't a visit. This was an invasion. This house wasn't a handout. It wasn't passed down. No one signed it over out of pity or legacy. I bought it. Every tile, every window latch, every inch of shoreline view, I paid for it, with years I'll never get back. After Harold passed, I kept working. Mornings at the school, afternoons, helping with the books at Miller's Auto, and nights managing the register at a corner mart that reeked of grease and cigarettes. 14 years, no vacations, no new coats, just quiet saving. People thought I was crazy. At your age, they'd say, "What are you saving for?" And I'd smile, never explaining that I was building something no one could take credit for. My sons didn't know. I didn't want their guilt or their opinions. This wasn't about anyone but me. The beach house had been a picture torn from a magazine at first. A little clapboard home with white shutters and a sloped roof. I taped it to the inside of my pantry door. Every time I reached for rice or canned beans, I saw it. It kept me going when my body ached and my bank account looked impossible. And finally, 2 months ago, I had it. A foreclosure with good bones just 5 blocks from the shore. I painted the shutters white myself. I scrubbed the floors with vinegar and hope. When the last moving box was unpacked, I stood in the doorway and whispered, "Mine." Not out of pride, out of survival. So when Taryn waltzed through that door with her clipboard and her flip-flops, I didn't see family. I saw erasure. Like all my years of scraping and sacrificing were just background noise to her weekend plans. She moved through the house with ease, assigning rooms to people I'd never met. Her voice bounced off the walls like she had paid the mortgage. My son stood behind her carrying bags, like an unpaid bellhop, avoiding my eyes. I opened the hallway closet, pulled out my overnight bag, and placed it by the front door. If they wanted the house, they could have the space, but they wouldn't get me with it. It started small. They always do. The slow slipping away of respect, of space, of recognition. Not through shouting or slamming doors, but through absence. Absence of thanks. Absence of effort. Absence of care. One Thanksgiving, I brought my cornbread, stuffing my signature dish. I'd been making it for 30 years. toasted cornbread, browned sausage, a touch of honey, and sage. At our old table, it was always the first to go. That year, it sat untouched. Taryn had filled the spread with things like quinoa, salad, roasted cauliflower, some modern cranberry chutney. She never told me not to bring anything. She just curated a table where mine didn't belong. At the end of the night, I scraped the untouched stuffing into a container and took it home. Matthew didn't notice. My birthday passed that winter without a call. Again. I didn't remind them. I'd stopped doing that a few years back. Once I had hinted, just a gentle, "It's next Thursday, you know." Matthew had smiled. "Oh, that's right." But nothing came. Not a card. Not a message. I told myself I didn't mind. But I did. I just kept quiet. Babysitting started as favors. Just one night, Taryn would say, "We have a wedding or it's our anniversary." I always said yes. But somehow one night became two. They wouldn't return until noon the next day, and I'd already made pancakes, cleaned up spilled milk, and washed pajamas soaked with a bad dream. Once they forgot to pack enough diapers. I had to run to the store at 10 p.m. using my own money. They didn't ask how the night went. They didn't say thank you. Just picked up the kids and drove off. Taryn never raised her voice. That wasn't her way. She corrected through exclusion. She controlled through dismissal. We don't do sweets. They don't really like bedtime stories anymore. No need to bring anything, we've got it covered. Always sweet, always polite. And always a door gently closing in my face. Matthew stayed silent. Always. His silence spoke louder than her smiles ever could. So I adjusted. I brought paper plates instead of pies. Gift cards instead of dolls. I stayed shorter. Smiled smaller. Until eventually I stopped showing up at all. And somehow even that went unnoticed. Taryn always underestimated me. I suppose that was part of her confidence, assuming the quiet ones are harmless. But silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And I had learned to play the long game. 6 months ago, when I closed on the beach house, I drove straight to my lawyer's office. David Caro, a sharp, no-nonsense man, who also happened to be Taryn's second cousin. The irony wasn't lost on me. I handed him the folder with the deed and asked him to draft a living trust. My only stipulation: include a clause, no occupancy, no guests, no extended stays without written permission from me. I wanted it legally binding. David raised an eyebrow. Planning to rent it out? No, I said. I'm planning to not be taken advantage of. He didn't ask further, because he knew. He'd been the one Taryn called 2 years ago when she tried to convince a judge that I was no longer fit to manage my own finances. Said I was showing signs of decline. That I forgot. Conversations confused dates. It was a tidy little file of manipulated half-truths. David shut it down before it ever made it to court. I never confronted her. I just filed the memory away like all the others. So when she marched into my beach house that morning, barking orders and assigning bedrooms, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I let her keep talking. And when she turned her back, I stepped into my bedroom, shut the door, and dialed David's number. "She's here," I said. 15 of them. "Do you want me to send the paperwork?" "No," I said steady. "I already printed the contract." He chuckled. "You always were more prepared than people think." I slipped the agreement into a manila folder, sealed it, and placed it on the kitchen counter. Bold letters across the top, short-term occupancy agreement. Inside a check-in time, a $2,500 refundable deposit, and penalties for damaged pets and unregistered guests. If Taryn wanted to treat my house like a rental, I'd give her the full experience. And this time, I wouldn't be the one cleaning up. I didn't knock on doors. I didn't gather them around for a lecture. I simply printed the contract, slid it into a clear folder, and laid it flat on the kitchen counter beneath the vase of wildflowers I'd picked the day before. I didn't even remove the petals that had started to brown. Let them see what happens when things are left to sit too long. The terms were simple. $500 deposit, $500 fee for every extra guest not listed, $200 per noise complaint, pets strictly prohibited, maximum occupancy 6, duration 3 nights, anything longer required written extension. Violation of terms would result in removal and forfeiture of deposit. And at the bottom, in bold sign, before settling in, I left a pen next to the folder. No instructions, no follow-up, just silence and clear terms. While Taryn played tour guide for her incoming relatives, I rolled my overnight bag to the guest room. I folded 2 days' worth of clothes into a duffel, added my toothbrush, a paperback, and the house key. Then I called Opal. "You ready?" I asked. She didn't need details. Car's already running. Opal was one of the few friends who knew the full story. She'd seen me come home from birthdays, where I was barely spoken to holidays, where I brought meals and left with nothing but empty Tupperware. When I told her I was buying a house on the coast, she didn't ask if I was sure. She offered to help paint. She pulled into the driveway at exactly 10:10 a.m., just as someone opened the fridge without asking, and a toddler dropped wet sandals onto my hallway rug. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't explain. I walked through the house like a quiet breeze, brushing past loud laughter, unfamiliar voices, and the sound of someone dragging a suitcase across my hardwood floors. On my way out, I paused at the counter. The contract was still there, unread, untouched. I opened the front door. Opal popped the trunk. As I stepped outside, I heard Taryn's voice from the other room. "Wait, where's she going?" But by then I was already gone. I knew exactly how it would unfold. That's the thing about being invisible for so long. You learn to predict everything they expect from you. By noon, they were already unraveling. Taryn had always played the role of coordinator, but only when someone else did the legwork. I was the one who brought the backup towels, who set up the coffee station, who remembered which kid couldn't eat strawberries and which one wet the bed. Quiet roles, behind-the-scenes things. Not flashy, not praised, but essential. Without me, the wheels came off quickly. They assumed I'd be in the kitchen, that the fridge would be stocked, that there'd be spare bedding, air mattresses, sunblock Band-Aids. Instead, the dishwasher was still loaded with unpacked glassware, the pantry empty, but for a bag of rice and a tin of coffee grounds, and the guest bathroom, thanks to someone's toddler, was already out of order. Opal and I sat on the patio of a small rental just 20 minutes inland, drinking iced coffee from paper cups. She read a mystery novel. I watched the tide roll against the rocks. My phone stayed silent until 1:14 p.m. The first message was from Taryn's cousin, Hannah. "Hey, is your MIL coming back?" We didn't pack towels. Then silence. Then wait. "Do we need to bring our own food?" Then from Travis. "The kids are hungry. What's the plan?" I imagined Taryn pacing, trying to keep her voice upbeat as she scrambled for answers. I pictured the moment she walked back into the kitchen, finally noticing the envelope on the counter, the contract, my absence, and the pen she never thought she'd need. At 2:03 p.m., her phone buzzed again. Not a text. A legal notification. From Caro and Associates. Subject: unauthorized occupancy. Attachments: enclosed agreement violation terms. Notice of formal complaint. I had asked David to wait until the contract remained unsigned for 4 hours. He followed instructions to the minute. Taryn didn't respond to the group chat again. The thread went silent. Completely. Because for the first time they realized they weren't guests anymore. They were trespassers. 2 days passed before Matthew called. The screen lit up with his name, and for a moment I debated letting it ring out. But I answered. I didn't say his name. I didn't ask how he was. I just waited. I didn't know, he said quietly. Taryn planned everything. I thought she'd talk to you." I let the silence stretch. He was expecting something. Maybe reassurance, maybe forgiveness, maybe for me to take the tension off his shoulders like I always did. But I didn't. I let the weight stay with him. He sighed. "She told me you were fine with it, that you'd be glad to have everyone." Still, I said nothing. "She didn't show me the contract," he added after a beat. "I only found out when the lawyer's email came through." My fingers traced the rim of my mug, the warmth long gone. I didn't mean for it to go this way." "I know," I finally said. My voice was even. "You never do." He paused. I heard traffic in the background, the sound of a car door opening, then closing. "The kids miss you," he added. "They asked where you were." That part caught in my throat. Later that night after Opal went to bed, I sat by the little fireplace and played the voicemail again. It was short. "Grandma, where are you? We brought our new floaties. I saved a spot for you on the porch swing." I pressed the phone to my chest. They noticed. For the first time in years, my absence had volume. It echoed in the cracks they used to fill with assumptions. I wasn't background anymore, I was a missing piece. And maybe that was enough for now. I didn't call back, I didn't explain. But the next morning, I ordered a small gift, online books and watercolor sets, and had them shipped to the kids with a note in my handwriting for quiet afternoons. No message for Taryn, no reply to Matthew, just a whisper where I used to overstay. It arrived in a pale blue envelope tucked among the usual advertisements and hotel brochures the front desk collected each morning. The innkeeper, a woman named Dee, handed it to me with a small smile. "Looks like someone left you a thank you." I wasn't expecting anything. I hadn't told anyone I was here, hadn't posted photos, hadn't left a forwarding address. But when I opened the card, my hands stilled. It was from a family who had rented my beach house for a weekend the month before, when I had offered it up temporarily through a local listing board to cover some moving costs. I almost didn't remember accepting their booking. It was during a time when I was juggling paperwork and paint samples right before I'd taken it off the market to settle in myself. But they remembered. The front of the card had a watercolor of a sand dune. Inside, in looping handwriting, it read, "We felt peace in every room. Thank you for creating this space." Our daughter watched the sunrise from the porch each morning. We read books in the quiet. Slept better than we have in years. It felt like love lived there. Love lived there. I sat down on the edge of the bed and let the words wash over me. It wasn't the card itself that undid me. It was the contrast. Strangers, complete strangers, had seen what I'd built. They'd felt the care in the curtains I hemmed by hand. They'd noticed the comfort in the blankets I folded neatly into the basket by the door. They'd walked into my home and honored it. No assumptions, no demands, just appreciation. I cried. Not because I was sad, but because the recognition had come from where I least expected it, and because it had never once come from the people I kept hoping would see it. I held the card against my chest for a long time. Then I folded it, tucked it into my journal, and stepped out onto the balcony. The sun was low in the sky, catching the edges of the water. That night, I slept with the door cracked open. The message came late in the evening, long after the card from strangers had been tucked away. Taryn's name lit up my phone, followed by paragraph after paragraph of words that sounded polished but hollow. "We don't know what we did wrong. The kids are hurt. Everyone's confused. Please explain so we can move forward." There was no acknowledgement, no ownership. Just an invitation for me to smooth the ground again as if it were my duty. For years I had filled in those blanks, interpreting, excusing, forgiving. But that night, I let her words sit unanswered. Instead, I typed a single message to Matthew. "You're always welcome here, but not with assumptions. Not with silence. I won't disappear to keep the peace." It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was simply the truth I had carried too long without saying. I set the phone down and went to pour myself another cup of coffee. By the time I returned, the screen had gone dark. Hours later, close to midnight, it buzzed again. I see that now. I want to do better. The words were plain, but different. They didn't ask me to explain. They didn't shift the blame. They admitted something finally. I read them twice, then set the phone aside without replying. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed him to feel the pause. For years, I had answered too quickly, stitched over every wound before it had time to ache. This time, the silence belonged to me. The inn's hallway clock chimed 12. I sat by the window listening to the low hum of waves rolling in the distance. I felt the weight of what was beginning, not reconciliation yet, but recognition. And recognition, I realized, was the first step toward respect. The next morning, I packed my bag and slid the card from strangers into the side pocket. On the 15th morning, I unlocked the front door and stepped back into silence. The house smelled faintly of wood polish, just as I had left it. No overturned chairs, no sticky cups abandoned on counters, no chaos pressed into the walls. For the first time in weeks, the space greeted me the way I had intended it to quiet, steady mine. I set my bag down in the hall and reached for the switch by the door. The porch light blinked on steady as ever. It had been burning each night I was away, like a promise that the house would wait for me. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle and scooped grounds into the filter. The hum of water heating was the only sound. When the coffee was ready, I carried the mug to the front window. Outside, the tide curled over the sand in even strokes, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. This house wasn't a token passed down. It wasn't a bargaining chip in a family dispute. It wasn't leverage for someone else's comfort. Every inch of it, floorboards, shutters, the small deck looking out at the water, was here because I had refused to fold. It was proof of survival. I sipped slowly, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. I thought of Matthew's message, the one I hadn't answered yet. I want to do better. Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't. That was his work to do, not mine. What mattered was this. The next knock on my door wouldn't be treated as automatic permission. Visitors would ask. They would wait for my answer. And if they couldn't manage that small respect, they wouldn't step inside at all. I turned from the window, set the mug on the counter, and opened the back door to let the ocean air in. The light poured across the floor in long strips, warm and certain. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing myself. I was simply home.